And good morning, everybody. So glad to be having this discussion this morning. Welcome back to our virtual marketing, communications, and sales forum. Today's event is about measuring and maximizing the value of marketing spending. I'm Carrie Neese, as Megan mentioned. I am with KPMG. I'm an associate director in charge of brand and marketing, and I am the chair of this forum. I'm excited to welcome you for a lively discussion focusing on the challenges, learnings, and best practices about marketing plans and spend management. Today, we have an expert panel of industry leaders to provide firsthand insight on how marketing spend management is now a strategic capability which will impact your organization's ability to thrive or simply survive. We hope you can keep your video on during this event, and if you'd like a more focused view, please put your Zoom in speaker mode located in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Today, I'm thrilled to feature Mitchell Kaplan, Managing Director, Marketing Consulting at KPMG, as today's moderator. He will be leading the conversation with Aaron Amico, Chief Marketing Officer at P33, Lauren Boyman, Chief Marketing Officer at KPMG, Maureen Maureen, EVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Northern Trust Asset Management, Ann Dooley, EVP and Global Business Lead at Energy BBDO, and Brian Hall, Managing Director, Chicago at G&S Business Communications. So we have a great panel lined up. We will have time for audience questions at the end of the program and encourage you to send them via the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Thank you again all for joining us today, and thanks to our speakers for taking the time out of your day to share your insights with us. And Mitchell, I will pass it on over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to those of you in Chicago and others that are joining us from other cities. Delighted to have you. We've got a great panel of talented marketing professionals. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to do intros. We're going to allow the panelists to intro themselves. I've asked them to intro themselves and also tell just a quick snippet because everyone seems to be so curious about what it has been like to work in this remote environment. I'll start by saying I have been in the marketing consulting space for a long time now. But I'm actually relatively new to KPMG. I just joined several months ago, and I have actually not met anyone from KPMG in person. So through my interview process, through my onboarding, which has been great, I actually haven't met anybody in person. So with that, I hope that story starts us off. I'll turn it over to Erin, introduce herselves, then we'll go Lauren, Maureen, Ann, and Brian. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Erin Amico. I'm the CMO at P33. And for those of you who are not familiar with P33, we are a nonprofit that was co-founded by Penny Pritzker, Kelly Welsh, and Chris Gladwin. And we officially became a 501c3 in about 2019. So I'm in the same boat as Mitchell. I have hired our first marketing manager. I've not met her. I've yet to meet her in person. And we've been working together for over a year now. But for me, the highlight of last year in remote working was definitely juggling working remotely while having to deal with remote schooling of two little ones. So I'll never forget when my second grader says, "Mommy, my school is so much harder than yours. All you do is talk on the phone all day." How do you argue with that?
Fantastic. Lauren?
All right, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Boyman. As Carrie said, I'm Chief Marketing Officer for KPMG in the US. KPMG is not a radio station. It is, for those of you who don't know, an audit, tax, and advisory firm. Like Mitchell, I joined KPMG pretty recently, a bit before he did. So I joined in January of 2020. Before that, spent the previous dozen years at Morgan Stanley, and the last role I had there was the CMO for the wealth management business. So I started my career in management consulting, really happy to be back in the professional services space. In terms of the last year, the thing that's really surprised me the most or been the most ironically rewarding is getting to know everybody on a different level. So while we haven't met in person, I feel like it's blown the doors open on our ability to, break those professional walls down and have real conversations and really get to know people on the team and their families in different ways.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Maureen Bromwell, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Northern Trust Asset Management. It's the investment management arm of Northern Trust that manages about $1 trillion of assets serving some of the world's largest investors. And I'm responsible for developing an integrated global marketing strategy that ultimately drives business outcomes. That's the holy grail, or the goal, I should say. I think what it's been like working in this environment in the past 12 months, I haven't been to an office in over 12 months now. It's been both exhausting and inspiring. I think exhausting, we can all agree. We can talk about 24/7 work. I think it's been inspiring by just seeing how people have really stepped up to the challenge and how it's forced creativity, and people are rising to the occasion.
Hi, I'm Ann Dooley. I am a global client lead for Omnicom, which is a huge communications holding company. We own over 1,000 agencies around the world. And my job is to lead all of the marketing activity from our media agency, our shopper agency, our creative agency, our e-com agency on the client's behalf in about 80 countries around the globe. This is my third stint as a global client lead for a multinational company. And so what has been really interesting for me is I've never been home. I filled 3 passports in the last decade, probably been away 150 nights a year. And suddenly I was home, 2 adult children were home, and my husband, who's a high school teacher, were home. And one evening, I was concluding a call with some longtime colleagues and actually friends in China. And I looked up to see my 2 adult children in the doorway leaning in because they'd heard the laughter and they could see these people on the screen. And after I got off, they said, Mom, we know you've been to China dozens of times, but we didn't know you actually had friends there. And it made me realize how much I missed seeing colleagues close or far away, and that I had this physical longing to be back out with my teams in other parts of the world, but also that we were all getting a peek into what motivated one another in our work lives that maybe we'd never seen before in our loved ones. And I think that's a really pleasant outcome from all of this.
Brian?
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Hall. I'm the Managing Director of GNS Business Communications. We are an agency that helps our clients engage their audiences with creative storytelling across traditional, digital, and social media. In addition to leading our Chicago office, I've been working for 20 years to help our clients communicate with customer audiences and B2B professional audiences, customer audiences in areas like advanced manufacturing and financial services. So that's the perspective that I'll bring to the conversation today. Agree totally with what everybody said so far about the virtual environment. I will say that one of the things that's been super cool for me is watching, and we use Microsoft Teams a lot. Once a month, we have a full office meeting with everybody from the office coming together. It's an hour and 15 minutes of a variety of speakers. And what's been really cool is to watch the entire office, the chat stream, just blowing up the entire time. People offering questions, support, encouragement, compliments, funny gifts along the way. And just the sense of community and energy that's coming from that has been a really positive thing for us. So that's just one highlight for me, is that those office meetings have actually gotten kind of energized by the fact that we are using a virtual platform like this one and the chat stream to its fullest extent. So that's been super cool.
Thanks, everybody. So we're going to dive right in on the topic of marketing spend management. At KPMG, we do a lot of work with CMOs and CFOs around not only the process of how marketing spend is managed, but also the technology platforms that we help put in place to manage and track and measure all of that. And I'll start with a question for Erin, Lauren, and Maureen around, obviously, it's been a very disruptive year. The marketplace has been incredibly fluid. I'm wondering how your approach to how you're managing your spend. You get a budget at the beginning of the year, but obviously over this last year, variables in the marketplace have changed dramatically over time. How has your process or internal workings changed in regard to how you're managing your marketing spend in this interesting time, I'll say?
Thanks so much for the question, Mitchell. I'll start us off. First, as I think back on 2020, there's a couple of things that I think most of us as marketers will really see as like the biggest takeaways. And one is that the need for agility and flexibility has truly been one of the only certains and the only constants. We've had plans that have gone on hold, events that have had to move entirely from in-person to virtual. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think as a result of that, marketers are more prepared now than ever before to strategically pivot, to shift, to be creative, and also to be more in tune with customer needs. And I think the winners in that scenario are the customers that have richer and more creative experiences when we do have to be more focused and more data-driven on what we're offering them. And I think the second big takeaway as I think about just 2020 as a whole and the impact that it's had on marketers are the societal dynamics that have happened. We've started to see for the first time ever things like equity and inclusion really outpacing what was the sort of pinnacle of customer interest, things like loyalty, and brands that have been able to step out on front as purpose-driven and really putting action behind things like diversity and inclusion really coming to the forefront. But as a nonprofit, I recognize that I have a unique vantage point on the topic of value and efficiency. And I really look at marketing value and the value of marketing spend across three levers. Am I creating value for my organization? Am I creating value for our partners, the partners that we work with across the ecosystem? And then lastly, are we delivering value to the region, which is probably the most important factor of the three.
Yeah, I mean, I'll build on that. And I agree with everything you said, Erin. And at its core, marketing is really at its finest when it's in lockstep with the business strategy. And so much has changed about the business strategy over the last 12 months. But it's really always critical for marketing to drive the goals that the business has. And, you know, there are times where everything works perfectly and campaigns are active and at the top of the funnel, you're driving perception that we want. And then there are other marketing tactics that are happening more at the bottom of the funnel to drive engagement with the brand and its professionals. And, you know, we influence sales. That's how it all works perfectly. But then when the world goes upside down and everything that we knew to be true about how we interact with our clients is out the window, then you really ask yourself that existential question of, you know, what is the role of marketing and what's the role that the brand plays and the value that the brand provides in a B2B purchase decision. And that's actually when it really matters, when all of the hard work that has built up brand value over the years comes into play, because, you know, that's not the time when a decision maker goes to a brand that they don't know. You know, they pick up the phone and call their most trusted partner that they've worked with before. Now, that's if there's a client need for your service, and then the sale can come more easily, but generating demand and value in this environment is much harder. So your objective as a marketer and what the definition of marketing is changes. So it becomes not about sales, especially at a time like the days and weeks after COVID exploded. It definitely was not about selling. It was about showing up, about being there for our clients, about offering support and demonstrating, you know, brand values like Erin was talking about. I mean, we should always be doing that, but of course, context and environment matters tremendously. So it becomes even more important during those times to show up with your brand values. I mean, the world was going in that direction before COVID, but the social unrest was really stress the importance of brands being overt about our purpose. So your original question was about this, the role of our brand budget and the strategic value of marketing. And I don't think there's a more fundamental role that can be played than helping to define and communicate your company's purpose.
Maureen?
And at the risk of sounding like an echo, I completely agree. I think when you boil it all down, the ultimate determination of the value of marketing is how well it's helping the business to achieve its vision, its goals, and advance its priorities. I think, from our perspective and from the organization that I sit in, we mainly focus on business-to-business marketing. And in the investment industry, like many professional services industries, it's historically relied heavily on a sales strategy focused on in-person meetings to attract and retain clients. And the unprecedented environment with everyone remote really has given marketing an opportunity to shine and deliver highly visible results with a very targeted budget. We didn't know if budgets were going up or going down. So we had to be very targeted with it. And we looked at the climate, I think, as both an opportunity and a responsibility to still connect with people and demonstrate our leadership and live up to the values or our value proposition and the messages we've been putting out into the marketplace for years, and to create opportunities for people to engage. And ultimately, so the sales cycle doesn't elongate as a result, and business performance doesn't suffer. And I'm pleased to say that our marketing team, like many, had their strongest results ever, despite the disruption. So, from a value perspective, it's once an organization sees how marketing can fill a void during a time that business as usual and face-to-face interactions aren't possible, and contribute real, meaningful, and tangible business results, it's hard to unsee that, as I say. And it's hard not to see the value and really look at it like a strategic function.
So thank you for those answers. Really, really insightful content. And I'm going to now flip it to the other side of the world. I'm an ex-agency guy. I spent a good bulk of my career at WPP at Y&R. So Brian and Ann, you're coming at it from a little different perspective in that you're working with CMOs and other senior executives in this period of disruption where sometimes the first reaction is that we just have to cut. So I'll be interested, Ann, go first, and then Brian, in your perspective on the counsel you've provided and the reaction from your clients in regard to how to manage spend during this disruptive period of time.
Yeah. Mitch, it's funny. This isn't my first recession or economic setback, and certainly not my first one globally. But I've always found the same thing works with senior clients. One is to provide them with marketing science evidence that they can use to make better decisions. And the other is to calibrate that and help them calibrate that against not only the short-term business challenges that they're dealing with, but their mid and long-term strategic objectives that they're still going to be on the hook to deliver. In terms of empirical evidence for making decisions, WARC had a phenomenal study this year, a 2020 study that looked at every industry sector, so B2B, luxury goods, consumer packaged goods, across multiple economic setbacks. And it basically showed three things. One, in every case, companies that maintained investment generated higher growth than those who reduced budgets and went dark. So a go dark policy has been proved over and over again to not work in the near term. But more importantly, the study showed, and I thought this was absolutely fascinating, that it can take up to 5 years to recover from budget cutting during a recession. And if you think about it, it builds on what Maureen said about brands have built equity and trust, and that is a share of mental availability that's a fast track to decisioning. And so, trying to get that back when everybody's upping their spending takes a much longer time and a much bigger investment. The final thing I tell them is, look, you've got your long-term goals, your midterm goals, but in the short term, actually recessions are a great period for agencies and clients to work together on scrappy solutions that lean into what your brand and your equity are about. And I don't have a great B2B example. I'm going to give you a really pragmatic one. Mothers like Erin and others were chief education officer. They were chief marketing officer. And, because life is like that, in many cases, they were still chief meal officer. And in many households across America, women were trying to do more with less, more meals at home, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And in some cases, somebody in the household had lost their job or their income. And so our client, Ziploc, did a quick pivot and offered these really brilliant, we call them leftover recipe ideas, that appeared in people's feed. And you could plug in the fact that you had a leftover avocado and a half of an onion and 2 chicken breasts. And we would serve up a quick meal idea from Ziploc, the brand that had kept your products fresh, but was now demonstrating its ingenuity and its empathy. And it was wonderfully affirming of the brand's values. And we got a lot of positive engagement from consumers about it. You get me is a great reaction to have in the time of an economic recession, whether you're in a B2B sector or not. Somebody's saying, you really get me. So that's my answer. Look at the data, bring the client the data, the industry data, but then make it really personal to their business, their mid, long, and short-term business goals.
Brian?
Great answer. Completely agree. I would just say right now, and building off of that, think about it, from our audience's perspective and the customer audiences that we're trying to reach, and all of those things that Ann was just talking about, all of the information and content that they're consuming today on a daily and an hourly basis through this pandemic. Think about all the demands that they have on a personal and professional level, and how those two, as Ann was saying, are completely mixing. And we've got an audience where I agree, if you go dark, you're going to be like, everything else is going to replace that. They're being overwhelmed with demands and information and content. So, the danger of going dark and kind of going in that stop and start kind of process has always been, really perilous, but I think today more than ever. And so for me, it's a matter of also counseling them about not this, spike and stop, or stop and start over again with them. And Ann was, referring to, data there of, the massive impact that can have, but to maintain a level of consistency and a level of engagement that's going to ensure that you maintain at least some level of brand awareness, on a consistent and an ongoing basis. So it's just trying to counsel clients through this to have that baseline, that very ongoing, engagement with the audience, versus those going dark or stop and start over again type of environments. Of course.
Thank you both. You're all right, Brian?
Yeah, my lights turned off. I didn't move enough.
There you go.
I need to be more animated.
We're at KPMG, we're doing, in the marketing transformation practice, we're doing a lot of work with CMOs who are trying to transform the way they measure their spend. So I'm going to flip this back to our client side folks, Maureen, Lauren, and then Erin, to ask, how are you measuring your marketing spend at this point? And for Lauren and Erin, who are relatively new in your roles, I'll add the variable of what surprised you about how your firms was measuring how they spent marketing, and how you've pivoted to optimize how you track the data and the results. So Maureen, we'll start with you.
Well, we try to keep it simple because, as we all know, there are a ton of metrics and measurements out there. I think a lot of them are vanity metrics, and we start with what are our internal goals, and we set them by aligning them with the firm's goals, and then answering the question, how and can will marketing help it achieve them? Is our strategy driving engagement with them? Not just impressions, but actual action and engagement. Is it driving consideration? Is it driving people to pick up the phone, which sounds funny in this environment, to reach out though, demand generation and sales opportunities? And finally, and this is what most CEOs and CFOs care about, is it driving sales efficiently? So that's frankly how, I mean, there's tons of metrics and KPIs behind them, but that's ultimately how we're measuring.
And I'll just build off that very, very similar situation. We try to keep it simple. We're a small organization, but going after a very big goal. And one of the things I'm laser focused on over the next decade or so, which is where P33 gets its namesake, our hope is that by the year 2033, Chicago is again a top tier tech hub. So one of the big lofty goals that I am addressing is how do we shift the perception? How do we shift the national narrative of our region as that top tier tech hub? There's a million different metrics that we could look at, but in the spirit of let's follow the data, let's be incredibly focused, we sort of boil it down to what are the two longitudinal things that we'll look at time and time again. And they're things like shift in perception against a very specific audience, and things like our penetration in a very specific set of media. Again, that by and when I say media, I mean national publications. Again, looking at the data, that is where we can have the biggest impact and the largest follow-on results. The other thing that I would say is similar to what Maureen mentioned. We really apply just kind of fundamental cost optimization processes. So holding everything up to the question, is this generating revenue for my organization? In the case of P33, the question of, is this driving impact? And based on the answer to that, determining, am I going to cut, maintain, or invest in that particular activity? The other just sort of pure best practice is, again, looking at data to be incredibly focused. So not trying to boil the ocean, but saying, where can I pick one audience, win there, and then move on?
Yeah, and at KPMG, and when I joined, there was certainly measurement in place, but I think what is really critical to always be uber focused on when you're talking about measurement or thinking about planning for measurement is to go back to what your marketing objectives are, because setting that objective and setting the measurement to achieve that objective up front is really the critical part of the puzzle. So, I mean, you can look at things like at the top of the funnel awareness, but for us, I think there's already a lot of awareness for the brand. And so I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time trying to drive the awareness piece. For us, it's more about perception, because there is a big gap in perception about what the firm does. I mean, think about Mitchell, what you do. KPMG isn't necessarily known as a marketing firm, but we have best in class marketing experts and marketing technology access that we aren't well known for, or the technology side. We've got tremendous amounts of alliance relationships. So our objective from the marketing side is to move the needle on that brand perception. So that is what we're putting in place now, is a baseline and measurement for brand perception and what we're trying to move. And then over time, we'll be able to measure that. The other big piece and obvious measurement goal is leads and understanding how marketing is moving the needle. So we do that, but I would say that is a fundamental challenge for all marketing organizations, and where technology really comes into play. So there are various technology providers. We're embarking on an engagement with Salesforce as one, but where you can connect the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. And so that marketing and sales connection and the ability to measure what are the activities that you're doing at the top and the middle of the funnel and how are they impacting sales is really that holy grail of measurement. So that's what we're working towards. In the meantime, I will say, just like any others, firms, there's a lot of ad hoc measurement of piecing together, triangulating different types of data sources. And if I could just wave a magic wand and have all of that be in one place in a pretty digital visualization or dashboard, that is what we're working towards, so that every morning when I'm sipping my coffee, I can just take a look at that dashboard and say, how are all of our campaigns doing across all of the different areas? We're not at that exact point yet, but we'll get there.
Yep. Thank you, guys. That was terrific. I will say that our group is actually doing some of the work for Lauren and her team, and I want to say they're a terrific client. That said, I do want to flip it back on the agency side from the perspective of, Brian and Ann, back in my agency days, I dealt primarily with the CMO. Sometimes the CFO would get involved and rarely procurement, but that dynamic has shifted. So I'm wondering, when it comes to the approach and discussions about how money is being spent at the client organization, how have those relationships changed in regard to who you're dealing with as a partner on the client side?
I'll go first. I still don't. I haven't in the past dealt on a frequent basis with the CFO at the corporate or enterprise level. More frequently with the CFO in group leadership team meetings with client senior leadership and the chief marketing officer. The CFO will be in the room. But more and more, what I find is that our CMOs, our country GMs or our chief commercial officers in the country are asking us to arm them with the data they need to convince their CFO. Their CFO will sit on a board and hear from somebody else that you can cut spend by this amount, or if you have some kind of supply constraint you don't want to market right now because you don't want to exacerbate employee dissatisfaction and pay penalties to retailers. And your commercial client or your marketing client is looking for, either is there data that confirms that they're correct, or is there data that I can bring to them that provides better perspective historically from other industry sectors, timely data that's coming in, that's projecting that growth is going to develop differently than we would have thought. So I find that I'm still not directly dealing with the CFO on a regular basis, but I am spending more time helping my marketing and commercial clients prepare to deal with the CFOs than I had in the past.
And I would say I'm spending a lot of time with our partners in procurement for many of our major client organizations. Just as we're working with our communications leaders and our marketing leaders, we're partnering on an ongoing basis with the procurement leaders from those organizations. So, we're seeing them as a major influencer over their communications programs. It's a lot of what we've just talked about as a panel here, but it's about helping our purchasing partners, understand and obviously look at the cost of their communications programs, but can they understand the business objectives that we're working for, toward helping them understand, the strategy, helping them understand the executions, helping them ultimately bring those executions to life for them. So they're not just seeing the purchase orders and the statements of work and the budget reports and the financial reports, but also just really helping them understand the value and the return on the investment so that they're looking at that more holistically than just purely at the cost. So I'm working with procurement as a managing director for our clients. I'm working with procurement on a very ongoing basis. Just as one of our kind of our key client leads there.
So we're coming up on the period of time where we want to be able to allow you guys to ask questions. We've got about 5 minutes left until that time. So we'll do a quick lightning round of our 5 panelists. And I'll ask this question. Across the different variables involved in marketing spend management, data, measurement, talent inside organizations to help do the measurement itself. What is your prediction on what is going to be one of the critical issues over the next 12 months as your organization evolves? What's the one thing you're focused in on to optimize how you're managing marketing spend management? We'll go Maureen, Aaron, I'm forgetting, who else did I forget? Client side, then Aaron, and then Aaron, then Ann and Brian. Thank you.
I think what's going to be the most critical is marketing attribution and ROI. And that's really, I'd say marketing attribution, ROI, client experience transformation, which both of which require data transformation. It's being, to be more judicious and more targeted in your spend, to make sure that you're actually achieving the objectives that you set forth, to make sure that you're targeting the audience, because, this decade is more about personalization than digitization, if you will. It's all going to require, in my opinion, a 360-degree view of the client, and working with marketing partners, whether it's media partners or promotional partners that can deliver really targeted opportunities, and then provide you pretty detailed reporting on how that's actually how they're actually doing so.
And very similar focus, I think it's going to be around data integration and getting that centralized, unified view of our various audiences that across our sort of quote unquote business units and verticals at P33, making sure that we have one dashboard. Our various partners, different agencies are all using the same systems. For CRM, we're on Salesforce. So being able to pull reports, so we're looking apples to apples across the organization.
Can I jump in here from a client side? So for me, I think the biggest challenge and the greatest opportunity over the next 12 months is for our marketers to develop fluency in the language of data and measurement, because I think a lot of marketers have a bit of an aversion to numbers. It's like, I like pictures and that's why I went into marketing, but marketing is a completely different animal now, and marketers have to be just as comfortable looking at a dashboard and interpreting that and figuring out how's my campaign doing and what do I need to optimize based on that, or what insights can I pull out of this data, as they are in, looking at color palettes and, image selection. So that's going to be a big, sort of change management or learning curve for the KPMG marketing organization over the next 12 months.
I'll jump in with a slightly different point of view. And then I think that data's been made too hard. And I think if anything's been made clear in the past 12 months is that people need us to streamline data so they can make better decisions faster. And I think capability building in organizations, investing in new talent and capabilities in ways to visualize data and get away from Excel pivot tables and spreadsheets and simply present the picture, the whole customer view, Maureen, is something that we have to insist our organizations are building. And I'm seeing the difference it's making in our ability to make quick decisions for clients on how to shift their investments in markets from one channel to another, or from one user group to another. And I really think we all have to be thinking about infusing capabilities in data visualization and making data more intuitive and less laborious so people can make better decisions faster is going to be kind of the hallmark of people's success in the next 2 or 3 years.
I'll just say I agree with that. And, I would say if I was to narrow in on one thing, it would be the ability to harness that data exactly as Maureen was talking about, to deliver those, those business to individual experiences, one-on-one marketing experiences to our target audiences.
Of course, I have to unmute myself. Everybody's used to that. So we've got a lot of really good questions coming in. I'm going to jump around just a little bit. I can't see who asked it, but someone asked, I worked very closely with my CFO this year on my spend. We're 50 years old, but this was the first year marketing and finance collaborated. What are some KPIs for those just getting started? So Maureen and Ann, can I ask you guys to respond to that from the perspective of if you were advising someone just getting started in marketing spend management, what are the 1 or 2 critical KPIs you'd advise them to start with?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record, but CFOs respond to, and so do CEOs. We have business goals. the business has goals. So the KPI would relate directly to a business goal. If it's raising awareness for expertise, for example, brand awareness, then it would be a brand measurement. Whether it's, awareness or consideration. I think what ultimately speaks, and this is where I think a lot of marketers historically have gone wrong, and maybe it's because I was an econ major and not a marketing major, and I spent a lot of years in sales. They're very practical, and so it really is, how is it driving sales? How is it driving the cost of sales down? How is it driving quicker sales? So I honestly believe, again, keeping it simple, but if sales, like in most organizations, is one of the main goals, tying it back to a sales metric and making the connection, even if you don't have perfect marketing attribution. I always tell my team, just because we don't have an API we can't measure it, doesn't mean we don't have to measure it. If we're spending time and money on it, we have to measure it.
I agree with everything Maureen said. I think the other thing that I would really encourage that marketer to do with their CFO is to look beyond the portfolio measures and look at their business by brand or business unit and say, what is the business problem to solve in that business unit? And is it lead generation? Is it demand generation? Is it top line sales? Is it share? What is the business problem that we have to solve? And do we have a metric that we can agree is a measurement of that? Because I think too often we look at things across these very diverse portfolios on a very broad basis. But the CFO can't help us and can't advise us if they don't understand the complexity of our business and how we have to handle different segments or different business units differently to roll it all up to those numbers. So I think educating your CFO on the different business challenges that you're trying to solve underneath the total is a really important thing to do.
So we're
Mitch,
in our practice.
Mitch,
I'm sorry. Who is that?
It's Lauren. One thing just on that question, because if this is the first time that you're CFO and you have collaborated, just one piece of advice to add on to what Maureen and Anne have already said is you have to be careful about taking the credit for the revenue. And so there's a term we like to call influenced revenue. And so if you can show how marketing influenced and contributed to the final outcome, I think that's a good way to approach it versus, saying, what are we responsible for?
That's a segue into my next question, which I'm actually going to toss your way, Lauren, which is, so in our practice, in the marketing transformation practice, a lot of our clients are asking us to help them with processes and organizational setup around increased personalization. So I'm gonna read this question for you. How do you balance the challenge of the cost of increased personalization, customization, to deliver effectiveness with the need to deliver continued improvement in overall ROI? Right, we have multiple practices within KPMG. So Lauren, what would be your perspective on that?
The cost of personalization is, it's hard to measure. If you are doing campaigns that are more targeted to specific client segments, you measure the fact that you're doing those additional campaigns, or if there's technology you're putting in place that provides the ability to be more personalized. That is, another sort of hardcore cost that you're able to quantify. All of that contributes to the influenced revenue that we talked about. So if you're able to show that because you targeted a specific segment and had a greater outcome because you were more personalized or had more relevant messaging than if you just did the broad, spray and pray approach, that winds up going a long way into making your case to getting additional dollars or being even more personalized about your marketing approach.
The only
Go ahead.
Piece I'd add to that, Anne used a word earlier, scrappy, that I love. So personalization doesn't always have to come with a hefty price tag. There's so many tools out there now where you can create personalized landing pages, personalized ads, look at ABC testing, and everything is really optimized. HubSpot is one, there's likely a million others. And then one of the things that we live every day in our world is sometimes personalization can be just looking at your own channels that come with no cost. So newsletters, emails, we saw an uptick in email open rates over the last year or so. And oftentimes, I think influencers are sort of the new ads in this day and age. But a lot of times the most effective way to use like an influencer-based strategy isn't going after those influencers that have 1 million, 2 million followers. It's really the micro influencers that have between 10,000 and 100,000 followers. So again, the more targeted you are and the more specific, the more efficiencies you can get. And again, being a little bit creative and doing the research and saying, what are the kind of free off-the-shelf tools that can help me optimize some of my existing platforms?
So Brian, I'm gonna toss this one your way to start. We're doing a lot of advisement work around omnichannel. Clients are coming to us and saying, my target audience wants to engage with my brand when they want, how they want. They want to buy from me, how they want, when they want. So I think this question is fascinating because often when we're going through organizational design and process design in regard to relations with an ad agency or another outside third party, we often find there are talent gaps on the client side as well in regard to their ability to deliver on omnichannel. So the question reads, omni-commerce, omnichannel marketing is changing so fast, lines are blurring, retailers are becoming media providers, we're all seeing that. How are you building capabilities, processes to build fully integrated omnichannel plans to deliver frictionless experiences for the shopper? What has been the talent need, the gap? So with your clients, where have you seen the biggest gap in talent on their side in regard to being able to deliver omnichannel?
Really good question. And again, so for me, like many others on the speaking panel, we're working a lot with professional audiences that we're trying to reach. If I would say, from our perspective, how are we doing this? Within our account teams, we have omni-channel specialists embedded right there with our account leads, developing plans, developing strategies, and being our connection in with our growing complete digital team as well. So we're really embedding omni-channel specialists within our account teams to drive that. If we look at it on the client side, I don't know if I would say, one thing that we're trying to drive is just continuing to recommend that greater integration and collaboration and alignment between who we're working with in communications and possibly marketing with their digital organization as well. I see maybe less of a talent gap there on the client side and more of a needing a greater level of integration and collaboration there also on their side between communicators that we're working with and their digital teams as well. Does that help answer the question some?
I thought so. Anne, I'd love your perspective on it around capabilities inside a client organization to deliver on omnichannel and or in regard to marketing spend. What are you seeing?
Well, interestingly, it was my client who asked that question, and we were just talking about it last night. This is obviously a burning topic, and it's a burning topic in every industry sector, but no more so than in consumer packaged goods, where we are dealing with frenemies every day who are our customers, but they're also our competitors, and now they are our media channels as well. And I guess what I would say is there are two things that often surprise me. One, senior clients don't give themselves credit for being lifelong learners who are able to learn the importance of new skills and capabilities and make themselves accountable for making good decisions on omni-channel investing, et cetera. They want to hire outside talent to do it. There aren't any senior omni-channel experts in the city of, there aren't enough in the city of Chicago to go around, right? So you have a choice. You can either be a courageous leader who sends yourself to school and does the training to ask, what are the things I need to know to make good decisions? And then I think you spice your team wherever you can with hybrids, people that are coming in from different sectors that are expert on e-commerce, they're expert, right, on retail media, they're expert on this, but you're not going to find any fully baked unicorns at a senior management level. Or if you do, Maureen's trying to hire them too, right? So I think this strategy of holding yourself accountable as a leader to say, you know, I'm going to talk to my retail customers, I'm going to talk to my agencies about what are my decision metrics and what are my change metrics for Omnichannel, and then what's the right mix of hybrid talent, and being willing to bring younger people in and spice them through your organization so that they learn the fuller business view, and they're not in such a little specialty area, and they have an opportunity to grow into a CEO or a CMO someday. And what you're getting in turn is their expertise, but you have to give them a platform to share it with you, the senior leader.
Mitch, if I can jump in here, I think the way to do this organizationally, because it's near impossible to fully change out a skill set of an organization at the same time, is to bring in a few experts and create a center of excellence that can then work around the organization with the different product or segment, you know, channel, whatever the name of the team is, a product group. And those people, the legacy individuals who've been there and have the relationships and know the products and services really well, that skill set is critical. They just need to leverage the newer skills of, you know, digital content marketers that can help them to take what they're already doing and, you know, move it into sort of a digitized, or take it out of a PDF. So that skill set is about digital content, and it's a mix of digital skills. It's also a mix of kind of journalistic capabilities. So I've had some talent over the years come out of news organizations with more of a journalism background, which I originally, you know, thought was surprising, but just makes perfect sense given that we're moving away from pure creative brand campaigns to more content marketing.
So I see we're coming up on the hour. I know we could spend another hour, and the panelists have been great in their answers. So I'll help us close out by asking a final sort of lightning round question, which is, what is the number one issue where you see opportunity in the next year? What will you be focused in on that your brand or your teams can take advantage of in the next year, based on the fact that we're hopefully, God willing, going to be coming out of the situation we're in? Where are you going to be focused? So let's go Maureen, and then across the board. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. So we're going to be focused on nurturing the leads that we were able to garner last year. We exposed the organization to a much wider yet still targeted audience. And we just, in fact, received the industry brand report, so I'm very excited, where we were called out for being only one of a handful of firms threatening industry leaders, and that the content we created intentionally last year ranked third behind BlackRock and Fidelity, which both of those firms have 20 times the amount of resources that we do. So it's not about outspending it's quality over quantity, and it's really being focused on nurturing those leads along the journey so that they can become, hopefully, lifelong clients of Northern Trust Asset Management.
Erin?
And I'll throw one out that we haven't touched on too much in this conversation, and that's the importance of design, creativity, and storytelling. I think the market that we're operating in right now has never been more competitive and dense and cluttered. So one of the things that we'll look at is really, how do you break through some of that clutter, in addition to taking a scientific and very data-driven approach, but with stories and assets that can really connect with people. And the way to get there is just with empathy and being incredibly connected. So I think that's something I just wanted to not lose sight of in this conversation.
Well, before I flip it over to Lauren, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll know I think creativity still matters dramatically, probably even more so at this period of time. But that said, Lauren, in the next year, what are we at KPMG going to be focused in on, or you in particular?
Well, I completely agree. Creativity is still incredibly powerful, and for us, we're going to be focused on bringing that creativity in to tell our full brand story, so that we can evolve the perception of the brand. That we're not just an audit and tax firm, but we do so much more. But with respect to this panel and the topic of measurement, I would say my most focused or biggest priority is going to be putting data and measurement in the hands of campaign marketers, so that they are empowered to understand what is working and what's not working in their own campaign world, and make optimizations and changes based on that.
Great. So before I toss it over to Carrie to close things up, Anne, Brian, your quick thoughts on the next 12 months?
I'm really going to be relentlessly focused on helping my my brand and my commercial clients figure out brand by brand what's the right balance of efficiency and effectiveness as we come out of this and mobility returns. And where are we driving for that quick ROI, and where are we really building for more effective engagement with people? And I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think it's brand by brand, market by market.
Brian?
Yeah, and I'll just say, by the way, I couldn't agree more with the thoughts on creative storytelling and how important that's going to be. I think one of the unique things that we're going to be focused on, again, working in sectors like advanced manufacturing, is what does it look like when we start to look at things like trade shows as a hybrid model, where we've got some people in person and some people virtually, and how do we make that, you know, a really great experience? So I think over the next year, you know, that's going to be a big unique focus for us.
Carrie, you want to wrap things up for us? I want to thank everybody. You've been just great. Questions were terrific. Carrie, it's all yours.
Yes, thanks, Mitchell. Thank you to all of our panelists. I just loved the diverse perspectives and experiences that this group was able to provide. I hope you all found this as cathartic and energizing as I did. When the club originally asked me to chair this forum, I was so excited because, you know, being a marketer in a professional services firm can sometimes be a lonely place. And so to have other marketers to talk about these topics with is just so fun for me. So I hope you all enjoyed the discussion as well. There were some fantastic themes that I think came out of this. You know, it seems like we can't talk about anything these days without talking about data. So the fact that data transformation came into play in this conversation is no surprise, but keeps evolving. I also love the point Anne made in the beginning about how it takes over 5 years and a much bigger investment to recover if you cut back on spending in times of recession, and how important it is to stay in front of your customers. I love that statistic as a marketer. And the recommendation to start with the business need when you're talking about KPIs, and also the discussion we had about talent and how to fill your talent needs in a very quickly changing world with blurred lines between the various players in the marketing world. So such a fantastic discussion. I know that it's hard in the virtual world to give a round of applause, but please join me in giving one to our panelists who did such a great job with this. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next forum event.